Chapter 269, Them, Too. The events that are taking place here are 5 months after Ren's death. Current timeline is 8. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal clashing against metal rang out repeatedly.
Ha! Ha!
Standing opposite to each other, 2 youths glared at each other. One held a long broadsword, whilst the other held a dagger in each hand. They were Kevin and Jean respectively. Both of their breathing was rough, and droplets of sweat trickled down the side of their faces. Lowering his body, Jin's body slowly melted into the shadows. Squinting and staring at Jean, who had just melted into the shadows, Kevin closed his eyes and evened his breathing. For the next few seconds, apart from the uneven sound of his sweat dropping on the ground, no other sound could be heard. Kevin suddenly opened his eyes. Turning around, he swung the broadsword. Clank! Sparks flew in the air as the body of the broadsword come into contact with both the daggers. Hop! Planting his foot on the ground, Kevin shouted out loud as the muscles of his arms bulged. Taking a step forward, he forcefully swung the broadsword down and pushed Jean a couple of meters back. KHH. Pushed back, a subtle groan escaped from Jin's mouth. Indifferently staring at Kevin, he twirled the daggers around his hand. Then, raising his right hand, he bent his body back and threw the dagger. Swoosh! Splitting the air apart, a whistling sound arose. The dagger was so fast that only a streak of light could be seen. Squinting his eyes and staring at the incoming dagger, Kevin tilted the broadsword vertically. Clank! Kook! Blocking the dagger with the body of the broadsword, sparks flew in the air as a small grunt escaped from Kevin's lips. The moment Kevin blocked the dagger, Jean suddenly appeared behind him. With his dagger in his hand, he swung. Shh! *T. Cursing, Kevin knew that he was in trouble. Gritting his teeth, rather than moving the whole broadsword, tilting his wrist, he moved the hilt of the sword by the side of his cheek. Clink! Cock! Just barely, he managed to block Jin's dagger from hitting his face. However, the recoil that come from the block still struck him right in the face, dazing him a little bit. Taking advantage of this, twisting his torso, Jin's body twisted 180 degrees in the air. Holding the dagger by the back of his hand, the tip of his dagger quickly approached the other side of Kevin's face. Staring at the dagger by the side of his eyes, Kevin once again cursed. Shh! *T. Clap! All right, that's enough. Jin's won. Standing in the corner of the room, Donna clapped her hands once. The moment she clapped her hands, a small shockwave swept the area, pushing Jean away from Kevin. Glancing at both Kevin and Jean, Donna was exasperated. I've said this before, but this is a light spar. You're not here to kill each other. If you want to do that, don't do it on my watch.
Ha!
Slumping down on the ground, Kevin dropped the broadsword down. With heavy breaths, he lifted his head up and congratulated Jean. Congrats on your victory. Standing in front of Kevin, Jean indifferently picked up his dagger from the ground. He then briefly glanced at Kevin. Win what? I know that you're still not used to the broadsword. Well, a loss is still a loss. For the past 2 months, Kevin had been switching weapons from a regular sword to a broadsword. Despite his inexperience with the broadsword, he was able to quickly master it to some degree, and even though he was not quite as strong with it, he was still a force to be reckoned with. Of course, that was only applicable if his opponent was someone that was not on the same level as Jean. When facing an opponent at Jin's level, his inexperience was quite obvious to see. I'm going to class. Taking one last look at Kevin on the floor, putting his daggers away, Jean casually strolled out of the training ground. Kevin, you should go back too, Donna said. Class starts in an hour, so get a shower and change. Listening to Donna, Kevin stood up and left the same way Jean left. Staring at Kevin's departing figure, Donna let out a sigh. Despite Kevin's attempt at looking fine, Donna knew that Kevin had still not recovered from Ren's death. He along with Jean changed drastically after that event. Even though they trained a lot before, somehow Ren's death had sparked a fire within them that made them thrive for strength. Just last month, both of them had almost broken through to rank. They were just a tad short, and by the end of the year, she estimated that both of them would break through to rank, before reaching rank by the end of their 3rd year. Their level of improvement honestly shocked Donna quite a bit. In terms of talent, there was no one else that could match them. They were total monsters. No, actually, there was actually someone else that could have rivaled their talent. Past tense. There used to be someone that could rival both Jean and Kevin in terms of talent. But unfortunately, said person was no longer present. If it was him, Donna didn't doubt that Kevin and Jean would have had a run for their money. Regrettably, that was no longer possible. Recalling the moments prior to Ren's death, Donna's eyes became downcast. If she said that his death had not impacted her in the least, then she'd be lying. Having spent a lot of time with Ren during their training days, Donna had gotten quite attached to him. Just like Kevin, his death had hit her. She had become stricter with her students and chose to pour all of her efforts into nurturing them so that such incidents would never happen again. Unfortunately, unlike before, she was now alone again. Monica was no longer at the academy, and the last time she had heard from her was about a month ago. Recently things have been quite hectic at the Union, especially since there was a war going on at the moment. Ads by Pub Future. One that was pretty much known to everyone. The Monolith versus the Union. After the incident that happened at the lock, the Union was seriously enraged, and from there, an all-out war between the two behemoths happened. Monica, being one of the strongest people in the Union, had to of course take part in the war. As such, she was always too busy to talk to her, let alone help her train Jean and Kevin. Actually, I wonder how Monica is doing. Tying her hair behind her head, Donna muttered. Let me try calling her. Taking out her private phone, Donna dialed a number. I hope she isn't too busy. I want to know how the situation on her side is. Ta. The rhythmical and repetitive sound of keys being pressed rang out. Dum. Inside of a fairly large room, sitting on a black leather chair that was twice his size, was Ryan. In front of him were 5 different screens. With both legs on his chair, Ryan's eyes darted all over the monitors in front of him. This continued for approximately an hour. After a while, scratching the back of his head, he turned around and apologized. Sorry, but there's no match. No match, are you sure? Positive.
Ha!
Small Snake, who was laying down on a small gray couch inside of Ryan's room, let out a long sigh. How many times have you checked? 11, there's no sign of him. Massaging his head, Small Snake mumbled. Just where in the world are you? 5 months had passed since Ren's disappearance. Ever since things had not really been the same. Even though everyone was still united, it was merely by contract, they weren't really doing anything apart from mostly training and lazying about. Small Snake could still remember watching the live stream where Ren died like it was yesterday. As he watched the stream he got the scare of his life. That day, he seriously thought that Ren had died. But contrary to his expectations, Ren had not died. He was sure of this. Why? Because of the mana contract he and each of the members of Kaisa had signed. Had he died, the contract would have long gone null. Since it wasn't, it meant that he was alive. Knowing that he was alive, Small Snake started to hope for his return. With Ryan's aid, Small Snake created a code that bypassed most of the public security cameras in Ashton City. From there, using a face recognition software, he looked through the many cameras in Ashton City in hopes of finding someone that matched Ren's descriptions. Unfortunately, despite all of his attempts, he was unable to spot Ren. Even so, he didn't give up. Ren was the core of Kaisa. Without him, everything would go down the drain. He had to find him. Do another check, Small Snake ordered as he glanced at Ryan. This time remove anyone that is fat and tall. Keep anyone that has a similar body build as Ren. Used to this, Ryan turned his attention back on the monitors and tapped on the keyboard. From time to time Ryan would start biting his nails, which would result in Small Snake scolding him. "Hey, how many times did I tell you that that is not good for you?" "Sorry." Whilst Ryan was busy coding, standing up, Small Snake moved towards the training ground where an enchanting figure sat down in the middle. Revolving around her was some sort of tangible black energy. Entering the room, Small Snake asked, "Angelica, do you have any idea where Ren is?" After so much time had passed and with no results, Small Snake was starting to doubt whether Ren was still alive or not. Even though the contract said otherwise, he really couldn't see how Ren had survived amidst that explosion. It was frankly impossible. Even so, he knew that this was a needless worry. Opening her eyes, a trace of disgust flashed Angelica's eyes as they paused on Small Snake, who was standing opposite to her. "Stick-like human, if I knew, you think I'd be staying here with you?" "Right, that's true, forget that I even asked." Small Snake bitterly smiled before glancing around and asking, "By the way, where is Leopold? I don't see him anywhere." Closing her eyes, Angelica replied. As she spoke, the disgust in her voice became even more apparent. "The beast-like human is outside, sucking on that fire stick." "Fire stick? You mean cigarette?" Opening her eyes, Angelica glared. "I don't care, stop disturbing me."
Ha!
Being glared at by Angelica, Small Snake quickly left the training room. Letting out a sigh, he mumbled, "Ren, wherever you are, please get back quickly." He was starting to lose his mind. The Union, 76th floor. "Goddamn bastards making me work 7 days a week. Even though I'm powerful, I'm still human." Sitting behind a desk, Monica muttered out loud as she flicked a small rubber on the top of her desk. Though Monica said that, she wasn't actually mad. A little bit tired, yes, but otherwise, she wasn't angry by the fact that she was working 7 days a week. She knew just how important her current mission was. At the moment they were in a very delicate situation. Just a few weeks ago, they managed to finally find a way to access the monolith. Although they couldn't directly send anyone there because it was too dangerous, and the location was unknown, the Union had a secret weapon with them. A special artifact that could create a small gate that could lead them towards a certain location as long as they had a visual image of the place. Regarding the image, they were able to get it by extracting the memories of multiple villains they caught. That artifact was the Union's secret weapon, and using it they were planning on sending a small unit directly to the monolith, in hopes of creating as much chaos as possible. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, was what the higher-ups said during the meeting. There were of course many limits to the artifacts, such as the limited number of people that could enter, and the cooldown period, but given the situation, it was without a doubt the best weapon they could have to finally deal with the monolith, a devastating blow. Those crazy bastards. Recalling the details of the plans, Monica's pouted in annoyance. "Why can't they let me join the infiltration squad?" Unfortunately for Monica, during the time that the Union was planning on sending someone to infiltrate the monolith, she was tasked with a different mission. And that was to garner the attention of the higher-ups of the monolith, in order to make the situation much easier for the squad they were planning on sending in. With her head slumped on her desk, she muttered, "Man, why can't those old bastards let me in on the fun? Wow, HM. Ring. Ring." Cutting Monica off was the sound of her phone ringing. Taking out the phone and seeing the ID of the person calling, she picked up the phone as a mischievous smile appeared on her face. "Is that you, Donna? Did you perhaps miss me?" "What?" Yes, yes. I missed you so much." "How sweet of you," Monica teased. "So what did you call me for?" She could practically envision Donna rolling her eyes inside of her mind. "No, nothing really, it's just that I haven't heard from you for a month. Did something happen?" At Donna's question, Monica's mouth trembled, and the pitch of her voice raised. No? So something really did happen. Donna's grew stern. "Spill it. Damn it." A defeated smile appeared on Monica's lips as she mumbled, "Sharp as always." "Well, no, not really, it's just that you're way too easy to read." "Ugh. That hurts." Unfortunately, for Monica, Donna's words had some truth to them. She had a difficult time hiding secrets as her face would always give her away. Fortunately, this only happened with Donna. Had it been anyone else, she would have been able to somewhat keep a stoic face. "All right, enough with the jokes, did something really happen?" Donna's stern voice rang through the speaker of the phone. A hint of worry was mixed in the stern voice. "If so, is there anything I can do to help?" Monica mused whilst playing with the rubber on the table. "I can't say too much, but all I can tell you is that we're planning something big." "Something big?" Donna questioned. Sorry, even if it's you, I can't say too much." This was a top-secret operation that the Union was going to carry out. Even if she trusted Donna with all of her heart, she couldn't say anything. Donna seemed to have understood this point as well, as she didn't pursue the matter any further. "I understand. Good luck with your mission." "Thanks, is there anything else you wanted to ask?" "Well, I was going to ask if you would like to come to help me train Jean and Kevin, but from the looks of it, you're going to be quite busy." "Right, sorry about that. I don't think I'll be available for quite a while actually. The operation was going to be a very risky one. There was a lot of planning involved, and it may take as little as a month's time to complete, to as far as 2 years' time." Tapping on the rubber on the table, Monica's eyes suddenly lit up as she thought of something. "I think that we should probably grab a drink before I go, what do you say?" "I like the sound of that." "Great." Monica suddenly stood up from her seat. "Let's do it right now." "Wait, what? Now?" "Yup, wait for me Donna, I'm coming." "Wait, what are you Ta-tack." Before Donna could reply, Monica had already hung up. Grabbing a red jacket that was resting on the back of her seat, she quickly headed for the door. "They won't complain, no?"
Meh.
"Who cares, I deserve a little break." Clank. Closing the door behind her, Monica quickly left her office. Chapter 270, The Last Hurdle, 1. The moment I stepped into the flames, I could feel the heat from the fire brush past my skin. Waving my hand forward and channeling the wind scions in the air, a protective sphere formed around me, redirecting the flames away from me. With the sphere around me, I moved forward. Towards the sea of flames. KHHH. A couple of steps into the fire, a small groan escaped from my lips. Despite the fact that I was diverting the fire away from me, the heat from the fire was no joke. The evidence of this was my skin, which was slowly turning red. Gritting my teeth, and ignoring the pain, I continued moving forward.
Ha!
Phew! Because of the raging flames blocking my vision, I couldn't see where I was going. Even then, I could still hear the agonizing shouts coming from the guards that were being burnt alive. Focusing on the screams coming from the guards, I quickly headed in their direction. They were my goal. Help. Before long, following the nearest scream, I arrived before a guard. Well, what remained of the guard? With the air barrier revolving around me, arriving before him, I was able to get a quick glimpse of his condition. The moment my eyes laid on him, all I saw was a charred body. With his hand raised towards my direction, in a groggy, almost inaudible voice, he begged. Help me.
Ah!
Sure. Lowering my body, I raised my hand and smacked his head, directly killing him in one hit. At this point, even someone came to his aid. He was too far injured to be saved. Hoo. Exhaling, my eyes paused towards what seemed to be the hand of the guard. On it was a small golden ring. Taking the ring from the guard's hand, I closed my eyes and channeled my mana. Great, everything is here. Looking through the ring and seeing that everything was still in there, I smiled in satisfaction. Taking out the ring that was on my finger and replacing it with the one I took from the guard, I put away my old ring. Once I put the ring on my finger, staring at the corpse of the guard next to me, I moved back, and once again let it be engulfed by the flames. Turning around, I moved a couple of meters away from the body and sat down. Hoo. Taking a deep breath, I knew that I didn't have much time. Closing my eyes, I decreased the radius of the air shield that was revolving around me. Burn marks started to appear all over my body, but I didn't care. I had to save as much mana as possible. The flames around me continued to rage wildly around me for the next 10 minutes or so, and just when I was about to run out of mana, the flames finally started showing signs of decreasing. Over here. There is an injured person over here. Before long I could hear the sound of the rescue team in the distance. Waving my hand, the air shield around me dissipated, and once it disappeared, the flames instantly enveloped my entire body. Closing my eyes, using the last mana inside of my body, I muttered. Monarch's indifference. Inside of a large room lit by a dim lamp, multiple figures sat around a large oval wooden table. At the moment, a heavy atmosphere shrouded the room as everyone's eyes looked towards a man sitting at the head of the table. Objectively speaking, he was a handsome man. He had sharp, well-defined facial features that shone beautifully under the dim light. His displeased expression was the reason for the heavy atmosphere. So you're telling me that you still can't track 876? His deep and cold voice rang across the room. Turning his head, and staring towards a certain individual sitting on the table, his voice grew colder. And you're also telling me that a commander like you is incapable of taking care of a single individual despite the fact that you had 2 units helping you? A heavy pressure descended upon the room. Every single individual's breathing became rough, and sweat trickled down the side of their faces. Reprimanded, Luther wordlessly raised his head. The moment he raised his head, and the light shone on his face, a massive burn mark that spread across half of his face became visible for everyone in the room to see. Clenching his fists underneath the table, Luther did not rebuke and apologize. I acknowledge my mistake. Propping his elbow on the table and resting his cheek on his fist, the handsome man indifferently asked. Is that all you have to say? No. Luther shook his head, before gritting his teeth, and suddenly standing up. Please give me another chance, Xavier. Bang! Smashing his fist on the table and startling the people around him, Luther raised his voice. I swear to you that I will grab that fucker and kill him with my own hands. Each and every single word that came out of his mouth was coated with unimaginable amounts of hatred. Although he did not get any serious injury, fury and humiliation surged within him whenever he thought about the incident that happened not too long ago. Such disgrace was something he had never experienced before. It remained in his mind vividly. Deeply starting at Luther, Xavier mused. So you're saying that you will take responsibility for your failure? Yes. Luther firmly replied. I see, all right. Really? At Xavier's agreement, Luther's eyes lit up as the flames of hatred that were flashing across his eyes burned even more fiercely. I will not disappoint you. But there's one condition. One condition? Luther's excitement died down, and what replaced it was wariness. As expected, there's no free lunch in this world. This was how the monolith operated. Luther knew that there were no such things as favors in the monolith. There were only deals, and Xavier was just about to propose his deal. What's the condition? Don't worry, it's nothing too bad. Propping his other elbow on the table and interlocking his fingers together, Xavier casually said. In the process of hunting down 876, I want you to bring a couple of recruits with you. A couple of recruits? They're fairly young, but I believe in their potential. Let this be a good experience for them. Is that all? Yup, smiling, he teased. What, you were expecting something else? No, I understand. Good. Smiling, and taking his attention away from Luther, Xavier switched the topic. Now, onto a different topic. Long story short, we're planning on ambushing Monica Jeffrey. What? Monica Jeffrey?
Ah.
The Sunset Witch? Gazing at each other, murmurs and whispers instantly swept the room. Everyone in the room knew who Monica was. The Sunset Witch and the next SS-ranked hero, a prodigy that had never been seen before, and the monolith's #1 bounty holder. Propping his head on his hands that were interlocked together, Xavier calmly explained. The reason why I'm telling you this is because the higher-ups are planning on ambushing her. Pausing and looking at everyone present in the room, Xavier ordered. In the meantime, once the higher-ups leave to take care of that pest, it will be your job to ensure everyone's safety. If there is anything big that is happening, it'll be your job to take care of it, understood? Listening to Xavier's words, everyone drew a cold breath. If what Xavier said was true, and the higher-ups actually succeeded in killing Monica Jeffrey, then the war between the Monolith and the Union would escalate even further and reach points where they would start an all-out war. One that would no longer be hidden in the shadows. Understanding this, the atmosphere became extremely tense. Fully aware of what everyone was thinking, Xavier sharply looked at everyone in the room. I repeat, did everyone understand what I just said? Staring at each other for a brief moment, standing up, everyone unanimously shouted. Yes. Good, the meeting is over. Clapping his hands together and standing up from his seat, Xavier turned around and made his way out of the room. Once he left the room, following after him, were the rest of the people that had attended the meeting. Luther included. For an unknown amount of time, darkness enveloped my vision. I didn't know how much time had passed, but eventually, regaining control of my body, I opened my eyes. The moment I opened my eyes, I was met with an unfamiliar white ceiling. My mind felt hazy and my vision was foggy. Did I succeed? Or did I fail? The boundary between reality and dreams was ambiguous. My whole body ached and many questions emerged inside of my mind as memories started flooding inside of it. Right, the fire. It was then that slowly I started remembering what had happened to me moments prior. The pain that was coursing through my body was what really reminded me of what happened.
Ah.
Slowly lifting my head, a small audible gasp escaped from my lips. Covered from head to toe with bandages, I found myself inside of what seemed to be a hospital room. Next to me were other people in a similar state to mine. "Oh, you're up?" A soft voice called out for me. Turning my head, a beautiful young girl with black hair and a nurse gown arrived next to me. In her hand was a small clipboard. "Are you okay?" she asked whilst unwrapping the bandages that were covering my head. "Your injuries were pretty severe. You've got third-degree burns all over your body. If not for the sedatives and painkillers on you, you'd be passing out from the pain." Watching her unwrap the bandages on my head, I refrained from speaking. 1, because there was a chance that they could recognize my voice, and 2, because my brain was extremely drowsy. With all of the medications I was on, it became incredibly hard for me to process what was happening around me. Had it not been for the chip inside of my head, it would have taken way longer for me to realize what was happening. Did my plan work? Looking around, from the looks of things, my plan seemed to have worked. Though it resulted in me burning myself once again, somehow, I was able to successfully infiltrate the monolith. "Alrighty, Mateo, stay still so that I can replace your bandages?" "Mateo?" I muttered out loud as I wondered inside of my mind. Who's Mateo? Never heard of him before, and why did she call me that? Too distracted by my own thoughts, I was unable to realize the fact that Mateo was the name of the guard that I had swapped rings with during the fire. In it were his belongings and ID card. That was why she had called me his name. Isn't that your name? Tilting her head, the nurse lifted her head slightly and looked at her clipboard. Mateo Monaco? Isn't that you? The nurse's words instantly cleared up my drowsy mind. I then quickly pretended to still be under the effects of the drugs. Huek, Teo. I guess you still can't quite understand what I'm saying. Fortunately for me, the nurse didn't put much thought into it and continued to replace the bandages in my head. Realizing that I had managed to somehow **T my way out of my blunder, I sighed in relief. If not for my quick thinking, I might have been in deep trouble. All right, I'm all done. Finished replacing my bandages, the nurse clapped her hands in satisfaction before saying, "Have some rest, I'll come back to check up on you tomorrow." KHM. I replied in a way that made it seem that I was still under the effect of the drugs. All right, now on to the next patient. Gazing at the back of the nurse, closing my eyes, the gears of my mind started turning. I need to get out of here as fast as possible. Despite the fact that I had managed to successfully infiltrate the monolith, I knew that the real trouble was just about to begin. I was closer to freedom than ever before, yet, it also felt like I was still miles away from my goal. Still, I wasn't disheartened. Since I had managed to get to where I was now, nothing could stop me from escaping this hellhole. Nothing. Let's think this through before moving. Laying down on the bed, I refrained myself from quickly dashing out of the infirmary. There were still many factors that I needed to take into account before actually moving. For one, without a doubt, the monolith was currently looking for me everywhere. I mean, I did kill over a dozen of their soldiers, including their top scientist, as well as blew up one of the entrances of the monolith. If they weren't looking for me, I'd be very surprised. Another thing I have to be careful of is the fact that by now, they should have an idea of the fact that I can change faces. They'd be stupid if they didn't, therefore, I have to be even more careful. Out of habit, lifting my hand and placing it on my chin, I started musing to myself. If there was anyone present in the room, they'd find the scene quite comical. That aside, my point still stood. Even if the people hunting me down hadn't figured out that I had something that could help me change faces, by now, they should already have an idea of what I was capable of. Therefore, I needed to be even more vigilant when moving than before. Couldn't be as reckless. Lastly, the chip. This was the problem that was bugging me the most. Although I had shut down the connection with my chip, the monolith without a doubt had some devices that should be capable of locating the chip inside of my head. Even though it may take time for them to set it up since Joseph was dead, I still needed to take this point into consideration. The more I pondered about this problem, the more I realized how little time I had at my disposal. If by the end of the week I was not out of this place, then I could kiss my chances of escaping.
Goodbye.
I needed to get out of this place by the end of the week. Chapter 271, The Last Hurdle, 2. Reporting for duty. 3 youths shouted as they stood in front of Luther. A sharp and distinctive aura spread from each and every one of their bodies. You must be the recruits that I need to watch over. Placing his hand on the bottom of his chin, Luther's gaze swept through the bodies of each of the individuals present. After a couple of seconds, he nodded his head in satisfaction. You guys are better than I thought. He had originally thought he was going to be put with arrogant recruits that knew nothing about real combat, but feeling the bloodlust that was emanating from their bodies, he knew that his previous assumption couldn't have been any more wrong. They were already fully grown soldiers. Let me get things straight, so your names are Ezra, Elisa, and... Pausing, Luther turned his attention towards one of the 3 youths. Staring at him, Luther could feel that this youth was different from the others. The bloodlust around him was 3 times thicker compared to the other 2 youths. Compared to the other 2, he was a notch above them. And Matthew? Unbothered by Luther's stare, stepping forward, Matthew nodded his head. That is correct, sir. Next to him, Ezra and Elisa seemed to have no qualms with the fact that he had responded for them. This did not go unnoticed by Luther, who squinted his eyes. I see. So he's the leader of the lot. Luther could see hints of fear and respect in the eyes of the other 2 recruits as they looked at the youth named Matthew. Turning his head and staring at Matthew, Luther asked. All right then, you guys must already be aware of what is happening, right? Affirmative, we're here to hunt down Subject 876. Good, good. Do you guys have any ideas on how we should proceed? Luther had obviously already made plans beforehand. The only reason why he was asking was because he wanted to test them. Since his job was to mentor them, he naturally had to do so. Affirmative. Matthew responded. Raising his brow, Luther gestured. Oh. Please share your thoughts. Understood. Taking a step forward, Matthew proceeded to tap on the smartwatch on his wrist. A 3-dimensional hologram of the monolith projected before everyone's eyes. Staring at the map, he started explaining. There are 2 ways to escape the monolith, and the simplest way to escape would be through the main entrance of the building. Portals weren't the only way people could get into the monolith. If one knew the location of the monolith, they could just directly enter through the barrier that was protecting the monolith. What is the other method then? The other method would be through the usage of portals. Listening to Matthew speak, a smile appeared on Luther's face. That is correct. I like where this is going, go on. From the reports that I've read, not much is known about Subject 876 apart from the fact that he is not a part of the monolith. As such, we can exclude the first option and conclude that Subject 876 will try to escape through the gates on the first level. Subject 876 did not contain any demonic energy inside of him. This meant that he did not sign a contract with a demon. Since he was not a part of the monolith, the probability of him knowing the exact location of the monolith were slim too. The only way he could escape was through the gates. Interesting. Listening to Matthew's deductions, the smile on Luther's face widened. Is there anything else you would like to add? With his brows knit, Matthew mused. Subject 876 also seems to be adept in combat, and from the looks of things, he has the ability to somehow mask his identity. Assume he does. I see, if so he will try to mask himself as a guard in the process of the escape. Reasonable deduction. Luther nodded his head. So far everything that Matthew had said was correct. Lifting his head, he asked. If you assume he can change faces, what do you think is the safest and fastest way to catch 876? Simple, we increase the security around the gates for the next week or so, and wait for him to come to us. Since he most likely knows that he's pressed for time, he'll eventually make a mistake and from there we can capitalize on it. Matthew replied without a hint of hesitation. 876 had a chip in his head, and in the chip was a tracking device. According to the reports, within a week's time, they'd be able to reconfigure the tracking device and once again activate it. Therefore, as long as 876 did not escape during that week, and the tracker once again worked, he was as good as caught. Ha 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 ha, Luther suddenly burst out laughing. Clapping his hands, Luther gazed at Matthew in satisfaction. Good, good, you share the same thoughts as me. He was originally planning on guiding them to come up with this solution, but it seems as though he had underestimated the youth named Matthew. He had already understood the whole situation. He now understood why the other two youths behind him were so respectful to him. Praised by Luther, Matthew did not show any signs of arrogance or satisfaction and merely lowered his head. Thank you for your praise, sir. You deserve it. Nodding his head, Luther turned around and waved his hand. Since you guys understand the situation, go to the first level and proceed as planned. I'm counting on you. Understood. All three youths unanimously shouted before turning around and leaving the room. Turning his head slightly and staring at a flat surface where he could see his reflection. Looking at the burnt half of his face that was reflected on the flat surface, a throaty laugh escaped from his lips. 876, I've already made my move, what are you going to do next? If things went according to plan, he would finally get his hands on 876 by the end of the week. Ding! Disrupting Luther out of his thoughts was a small sound that came from his watch. Lowering his hand and tapping on his watch, the smile on Luther's face deepened. This might end faster than I had originally anticipated. Splash! Washing my hands in the sink, and staring at the small black bracelet in my hands, I turned the water off. Staring at myself in the mirror, I muttered. I've seen worse. Though my face was still burned, it wasn't to the same degree as the first time I got burned. By the time the flames had engulfed me, the rescue squad had already arrived. After that, I was quickly sent to the infirmary where I spent the last couple of days in. During those couple of days at the infirmary, aside from the fact that I needed to recover from my injuries, I tried to gain as much information as possible regarding the monolith. This was done through either listening to what the doctors and nurses were talking about, or just casual conversations I had with them when they were tending me. It was from those little conversations I had that I was somewhat able to learn of the structure of the monolith. Currently, I was in the infirmary which was located at the third level of the monolith. There were a total of 5 levels and each level was massive. My current goal was the first level. That was where the gates were located. To talk. Disrupting me out of my thoughts was a loud knock by the side of the bathroom. Matteo, are you finished? Without responding, I lowered my head. Putting the bracelet on my wrist, I gazed at myself in the mirror. It's time. Matteo? If you don't respond, I'm going to forcefully come in. Unable to hear my response, the person behind the door once again called out for me. Grabbing the sides of the sink, I hoarsely said. KHH, sir, I might need some help.
Ha!
What is it this time? I'm coming in. Tick. Opening the door of the bathroom, the guard came into the bathroom. Staring at that guard, I pointed at the sink. Over here. What is the PR? Clank. The moment the guard neared me, grabbing him by the head and covering his mouth with my left hand, I kicked the door shut. MMHHH. With my left hand on his mouth and my right arm around his throat, I clenched my teeth and choked him as hard as I could. The guard's struggle persisted for 10 seconds before he eventually fainted. Squeak. Taking out a serum from my dimensional space, I quickly injected it into his body. Then, dropping down the guard's body onto the ground and waiting for the serum to take effect, I stripped his body and replaced his clothes with mine. I also didn't forget to take the ring from him. Once I was done changing, lowering my head, and staring at the guard, I took out my mask and placed it on his face. A blue glow enveloped the room and a quarter of my mana dissipated. Gulp. Taking out a potion from my dimensional space and chugging it, I placed my hand on the guard's face and channeled my mana. More specifically, flame scions. Slowly, the guard's face started to melt. Hoo. Because of the serum, the guard was unable to feel the pain and thus didn't wake up. Closing my eyes, taking a deep breath, after 10 seconds passed I removed my hand from his face. Opening my eyes and staring at the guard's face, my brows knit. His burns look a little bit too fresh. Compared to my face, the guard's face looked quite different. His fresh burns would quickly give away the fact that it wasn't me. Thus, taking out a low-quality healing potion from my dimensional space, I fed it to the guard. Slowly his burns started to get better. This is better. After feeding him 2 potions, taking out the bandages from the ground, I started to slowly wrap them around his face. I hope this works. Even though it didn't look perfect, it still looked quite similar to me. Especially since the guard had a similar build to mine. Once I was done wrapping his face, standing up, and putting him on my shoulder, I slowly opened the door. Right. Just as I was about to open the door fully, I put the mask on my face. Feeling a tingling sensation envelop my face, after a couple of more seconds passed, I fully opened the door and finally stepped out of the room. Clank. Closing the door behind me, I headed for the infirmary. The location wasn't far. By the time I took a couple of turns, I was already there. What happened to him? The moment I entered the infirmary, I heard a startled scream coming from the other side of the room. Lifting my head, I watched as the nurse that had tended me for the past couple of days rushed in my direction. Taking a step back and raising my hand, I talked to her in a calm voice. Please calm down, he's just passed out, I've checked his breathing. There is nothing wrong with him. At my words, the nurse calmed down a bit. Let me check. Sure. Putting Mateo down on the bed, I watched as the nurse measured his pulse. Whilst she was checking his pulse, staring at her from behind, I silently channeled my mana towards my hand. If by chance she noticed something, I was prepared to eliminate her right here and right now. Phew, you were right. He's only passed out. To the luck of both parties, it seems like she was unable to notice anything strange. Is that so? Then I will go back and patrol. I smiled. Good luck with your work. Thank you. Turning around, I quickly left the room. What I didn't notice upon leaving the room, however, was the nurse slowly taking out a small black box from her breast pocket. Placing the black box near her mouth, she muttered. Reporting, as you've said, Subject 876 was hiding in the infirmary. Chapter 272, The Last Hurdle, 3. Are you guys ready? A stern male with a gray suit and squared glasses asked. Holding onto a small spherical object, he raised his head and looked at the people in front of him. There were a total of 15 people in front of him, and each and one of them had a terrifying aura revolving around them. The lowest ranked member present was ranked, and the only reason why he was there was because of his special ability. Calmly glancing at everyone in the room, the gray-suited male's eyes paused towards a certain girl. An orange-haired one. Monica, I want you to listen carefully. Lifting his glasses with his index finger, he sternly said. Your task is simple, you are to create as much chaos as possible. The location we've set is right outside the monolith, you alongside the others are to divert the attention of the higher-ups away from the main building. Tisk, why do I get the most boring task? Monica clicked her tongue. You're not the only one doing the boring task. Behind her, one of the individuals spoke up, causing Monica to turn around and glare in his direction. Shut up, meat fodder. What did you call me? I called you meat fodder, isn't that what you are? Do you want to fight? Come on, I'm ready. Bickering with Monica was a white-haired man with red eyes. His skin was quite tanned and he had a sturdy build. An unfathomable aura exuded from his body, it was to the point that it even exceeded Monica's. Ranked 5th in the hero ranking, SS-ranked hero, Amon Slaba, the Unbreakable Shield. Calm down, both of you. Stepping in and stopping the both of them, was a tall black-haired old man. A light gray goatee drooped down from the middle of his chin, and a white stripe appeared by the side of his hair. Ranked 4th in the hero ranking, SS-ranked hero, Tassus Mulattoes. Let's not do this now. Raising his hand to stop Amon from attacking Monica, before turning his attention towards her. Monica, if you think about it, Amon and I are going to be the ones that will do the real heavy work. We're the ones that will actually be suffering the most, please be a little more respectful. Both being SS ranked, it was them who were actually shouldering most of the troubles. Monica was merely there to deal with the weaker S-ranked villains. Raising her hands, Monica complained. That's why I'm saying it's boring. With you two next to me, how am I supposed to get a piece of the fun? Tassus smiled. Monica, if only it was as easy as you make it seem. The mission they were currently being tasked to do was extremely dangerous. Even he, an SS-ranked hero, felt threatened by the mission. Less need to be said about Monica, who was weaker than him. I know, be you. All right, everyone, please be quiet, I'm about to activate the artifact. Cutting Monica off was the gray-suited male from before. Closing his eyes, and channeling his mana into the sphere, a yellow glow suddenly enveloped the room. Shortly after, small threads of mana lingered in the air as a small portal formed before everyone's eyes. Boom! The moment the portal appeared, everyone stopped whatever they were doing and solemnly stared at the portal. Heavy tension descended into the room.
Ha! Ha!
Done. With heavy breaths, the gray-suited individual looked at all the people present in the room. Evening his breathing, he spoke. Please be careful when you go in, the goal of this mission is finally deal a heavy blow to the monolith. I want you guys to take this seriously, and please try to come back safely, we can't afford to lose any of you guys. Listening to the man's words, everyone reassured. Will do, don't worry. Roger. All right, here. Turning his attention towards Monica, the gray-suited male handed her the orb. Once you're done with everything, channel your mana into the orb and a portal should appear. Let me warn you though, the orb requires a lot of mana to activate, so don't go all out and preserve some mana. I at least know this much. Monica replied as she put the orb away. All right, good luck on your mission, everyone. Thanks. Thanking the gray-suited individual, the first one to move forward and step into the portal was Amon. I'll be the first one to go in. I'll
See ya.
LL on the other side. Boom. Wait up, you meat shield. Heyish, can you two stop it? Following him were Monica and Tassus. Vroom. Vroom. Eventually, everyone entered the portal, and silence descended in the room. Staring at the portal that was slowly closing, the gray-suited individual lifted his glasses up with his finger before muttering. All the preparations are ready, the rest is up to you. At the same time, standing in front of the large monitor where the image of a guard strolling around could be seen, Matthew turned his head and asked. The target seems to be moving towards the second level. What should we do? We wait. Wait? Yes. Without taking his eyes away from the monitor, Luther calmly explained. We're going to observe him for a little bit more. I see. Matthew's brows knit, obviously not satisfied with the answer. After a bit of hesitation, turning his head, he asked. If I may ask, why can't we alert the others about him and just take him in? Interlocking his hands behind his back, Luther briefly glanced at Matthew. Be patient, Matthew. Our turn will naturally come. We don't know what he's planning, and we also don't want to startle him too early. We should first trap him before moving in. If it was just him, he would have gone and captured 876 already, but since he was tasked with nurturing the new recruits, he couldn't be too careless. Either way, we've sealed the gates, so it wouldn't hurt to know what he's planning. Since I'm responsible for you all, I have to make sure you guys don't die. Since this was a mission given to him by Xavier, he knew that the recruits over here were important. He couldn't let them die. Sir, the cameras for Corridor 2, Hall/4 have spotted 876. It seems like he has entered one of the guards' dormitory. Disrupting Luther out of his thoughts was Matthew. Turning his head, he questioned. Dormitory? Luther's face turned into a scowl. Is he planning on switching faces again? How laughably predictable. The more he observed 876, the more scornful he became. At first, he thought he was someone smart, especially since he had managed to flawlessly escape the lab. However, from the looks of things, he had overestimated 876. He was merely someone who relied too much on an artifact that allowed him to change faces. Turning around, he looked at his members and ordered. All right, let's get this over with, it's time to move out and catch that little rat. With 876 entering the dormitory, Luther knew that they had caught him. There were no escape routes that he could take. He was done for. Smirk. Walking away from the infirmary, a smirk emerged on my lips. By now you think you've got me, no? If so, they were in for a surprise. From the very beginning, I knew that the nurse was closely monitoring me. Not just me, but everyone that was present in that specific room. Though the chances of them thinking that I had purposely burned myself were low, they were not slim. Therefore, it wouldn't have been strange for them to send someone to monitor the patients in the likelihood that this happened. Turns out that they weren't wrong. I really was hiding amongst the burn victims. Just then, me raising my hand pretending to kill her was also part of the act. From a glance, I could tell that she was pretending to check the patient, and was actually looking at me. Once she saw that I was ready to kill her, she quickly acted as though everything was all right. Might have fooled someone else, but not me. Should be this way. Turning right into a corridor, I lowered my head and hastened my footsteps slightly. Even though I had already left and wasn't sure what the nurse was doing at the moment, I knew that she had probably warned the others of my whereabouts. Well, in all honesty, I wasn't really that thorough when burning the guard's face. Though I covered his face with the bandages, it was pretty obvious that it wasn't me. Anyhow, it was the effort that mattered. As long as I made it seem like I tried, then everything was fine. Her warning the others about my whereabouts was what I wanted. I hope that by now they know about my ability to change faces, I thought to myself, as I calmly walked through another corridor of the facility. They wouldn't be that dumb, right? Everything that I did since the beginning was not a coincidence. From the very moment I pretended to be the unit captain back in the forest, I knew that my ability to change faces would be found out. There was no way Luther wouldn't have found out about it due to the obvious difference in stature. Maybe the others, since they were distracted by the fake body in my hands, but not someone as experienced as Luther. I had not spent 6 months thinking about my escape from the lab to just throw it away due to a simple mistake. Letting him know that I could change faces was part of my plans. I guess my worries were unfounded. Walking around the facility, I noticed that my path was fairly unobstructed. This could only mean one thing: they were monitoring my movements. The only reason why my path was unobstructed was because they didn't want to alert me. And that's exactly what I wanted. Lowering my hat to hide the smile that had emerged on my face, I continued to move forward with even strides. From the moment I was stuck inside the lab thinking about my escape routes, I realized that being passive and continuously hiding using the mask was not going to cut it when infiltrating the monolith. I needed to be more aggressive with my approach. Rather than waiting for an opportunity, I had to create one. And that was exactly what I was planning on doing. By directly setting a target on myself, I was letting them feel in control. Though my plans were filled with inconsistencies and were full of flaws, that was on purpose. From the very beginning, my main plan was to act in a way that made it possible for me to read my opponent's next moves. By putting subtle flaws in my plans, I was trying to influence their minds in a way that made them think and act the way I wanted them to. And once you know what your opponent's next move is, everything else becomes easy. Freely moving around the monolith, I quickly entered the second level. Completely unobstructed. Wherever I went, no guard said anything or stopped me. Everyone was just minding their own business. Upon entering the second level, checking the map on my watch, I headed towards the right. Walking for a couple of minutes, I arrived before a metal door. Dormitory, room 45. This should be it, I think. Taking out a small card from my pocket and seeing the 45 engraved on it, I quickly swiped it. Clink! Upon scanning the card by the side of the door opened. Entering the room, the first thing I saw was 5 individuals sitting in front of a circular table playing cards. The smell of smoke invaded my nostrils. With a cigarette in his mouth, one of the 5 individuals turned their head in my direction and pointed at the table. "Oh. Ansel, you finished with your shift? Come and join us. Give me a second." Tapping onto my bracelet, a sword appeared in my hand. Nostalgically looking at the sword, I muttered to myself. This should do for now. Though it wasn't Bleak Star as it had been destroyed during the explosion, it was still a sword. This was enough for me. Oi, why are you taking out a sword?" the guy from before said. A hint of wariness appeared on his face. "Oh, don't mind me. It's just been a while since I've touched a sword." "A sword? Since when do you practice the sword?" "A while." "I've never seen you hold a sword before. When you said a while, it must have been quite a long time ago." The guy laughed. Been quite a while." Smiling, I nodded my head. 8 months to be exact. Given that I had stayed in this world for only 2 years, it was quite a lot of time. "Anyway, put the sword down and come play a game with us." Right. Putting my sword by the right side of my waist, I smiled and calmly walked towards the table. Glancing around and making sure there were no cameras, I approached the table. Smirking, the guy holding onto the cigarette pointed at his watch. "You know the rules. If you want to play, you must start with 10 merit points." "Is that so?"
Yeah.
Click. Suddenly, a subtle metallic click rang out in the room. Following this, with his eyes wide open, one of the 5 individuals sat on the chair slumped on the ground. A gaping hole appeared on his forehead. What are you doing? Hey! Ansel. Startled, everyone stood up and took out their weapons. Ignoring them, and staring at the guard I had just killed, I thought to myself. It's been a while since I last heard this sound, feels quite nostalgic. Answer me. Why are you doing this? Raising my head, and staring at the 4 individuals who had surrounded me, I lowered my head and once again placed my hand on the sheath of the sword. Sorry, but all but one guy will have to die for me. Click. Once again, a clicking sound resounded across the room. Not long after, heavy silence descended in the room. Chapter 273, The Last Hurdle, 4. KZZZZZZZ, holding onto a cylindrical glass tube, a faint red glow enveloped my hand. The contents inside of the cylindrical glass tube slowly started to boil. This should do. Staring at the gas that was forming in the tube, a satisfied smile appeared on my lips. Glancing towards my right where one of the guards was dully standing, I removed the mask that was on my face, revealing my burned-up face. Here, put this on. Walking next to him, grabbing his hand and raising it towards his face, I gave him the mask. This should do for now. Staring at the guard who with his right hand was supporting the mask on his face, my lips smacked together. Even though he was under the effects of the serum, I couldn't really make him channel mana, so this was good enough for now. Out of the 5 individuals, his build was the closest to mine, and so he looked like a perfect mannequin of me. Glancing towards my left and right to make sure that everything was perfect, I lay down beneath his feet with my back facing the door. Everything should be ready. According to my estimates, within a couple of minutes, a special unit would come to the room. That was the unit designed to hunt me down. Just like they wanted me gone, I wanted them gone as well. My goal in killing them was so that I could take their commander's badge. There were multiple gates at the bottom level, and according to my estimates, they were heavily guarded. But gates had different grades too, with some gates specifically only accessible to those that were of a higher grade. Unlike the common gates, they should be less guarded since they required a special badge in order to access, which no one would expect me to have. Luring the commander to me was the real goal. He was the true key to my escape. By giving such subtle hints and flaws throughout my escape, I wanted to create a scenario where they would see me moving in accordance with their predictions, whilst in reality, I was masking my true intentions. They were treating me as though I was a mouse stuck inside of a labyrinth with no escape route, when in reality, it was the exact opposite. The entire time, the one controlling their moves was me. If there was no escape route, I just merely had to create one. Vroom. 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 Appearing inside of a lush green forest, was a small black portal. Emerging from it were over 15 individuals, each with a distinctive aura revolving around them. Stepping out of the portal and putting her hand in front of her forehead whilst gazing at the scenery in front of her, Monica muttered. Well, this is not what I expected. What did you expect? Amon asked as he stared at the enormous infrastructure in the distance. Did you expect to be transported inside of a cave? No, Monica shook her head. Scratching her nose, she said. I was expecting something along the lines of a blood-red sky, or dark clouds with lightning crackling down from the sky, oh, and a black castle too. You watch too many movies. Listening to Monica's words, Amon was left speechless. You realize we're on Earth, right? I know, but a woman can still imagine, no? There's a limit to how much someone can imagine. What did you say? All right, be quiet, the both of you. Cutting Monica before she could blow her top off was Tassus. Don't forget we're here to finish a mission. Bicker later, not now. Tisk, fine. Right. At Tacitus's words, Amon and Monica begrudgingly nodded their heads. So what next? Amon asked. What are we supposed to do now that we've infiltrated the place? That is up to Monica. Responding to Amon, Tacitus looked at Monica. If you can please do the honors? Me? Yes, go ahead. Don't mind if I do. Laughing to herself, Monica unsheathed a thin silver sword from the side of her waist. Caressing the body of the sword, she muttered. It's about time I try this baby out. Dawn of the Avenger, the ranked sword that she had gotten from the auction almost 10 months ago. Ever since buying it, she had never tried the sword before, but now that the opportunity had presented itself, Monica couldn't help but be excited. Tisk, if only I didn't specialize in defense. Staring at Monica's sword, and turning his head to the side whilst clicking his tongue, Amon grumbled to himself. If only I had at least one offensive ability. He was called the Unbreakable Shield for a reason. It was because he could stop the attacks coming from multiple ranked heroes at the same time without dying. He was a walking fortress, and one of the reasons why he was selected for this mission. Unfortunately, despite his great defense, he lacked in the offensive department, and even though his personality was that of someone who wanted to destroy things, he could only watch as Monica hogged all of the fun for herself. Right, before I forget. Just when Monica was about to prepare to attack, recalling something, she turned around and looked at the infiltration team. The moment my attack will land, that is when you guys go and infiltrate the facility. A solemn look replaced her usual childish one. Just like the director said, your goals are the portals, so head there as soon as I create an opening. Roger. The infiltration team solemnly nodded their heads. Just like Monica said, the goal of the mission was to destroy the portals that were inside of the monolith. More specifically the core inside of the portals. Upon cracking the core, they would be able to create a massive explosion that would destroy a major part of the monolith as well as kill a lot of their important figures. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, Monica muttered inside of her mind as she recalled what had happened 8 months back at the lock. Indeed, Monica had never forgotten the events that took place 8 months back 8 months ago. What she was doing now was essentially the same thing they did back at the lock. She wanted to let them know what happens when they cross lines that they should have never crossed. Good. With a solemn look, Monica raised her sword and closed her eyes. I'll start now. Channeling her mana, her sword suddenly started to resonate, unleashing an orange hue. The magic power slowly started to condense into a gigantic magic sword that levitated in the air. Slowly, tremendous pressure engulfed the area. Within a couple of seconds, the mana in the air had thickened up so much that it started to become tangible. Hoo! Exhaling, Monica opened her eyes and took a step forward. All right, I'm going to start. Get ready. The moment her words fell, she slashed down. Vroom! Slashing down, the world froze and the sword slowly started to move towards the large infrastructure in the distance. Thin undulations of magic spread in the air, fabricating a scene resembling the northern lights. What's this? Just when the sword energy was about to hit the monolith, materializing in front of it was a skinny old man with sunken eyes and cheekbones. With a black mantle covering his body, the old man held a scythe in his right hand. Glaring at the sword, he shouted. How dare you! Waving his hand forward, a translucent green shield appeared in front of him. Next to him, multiple other individuals appeared. But it was too late. Boom! The sword came into contact with the shield, and a massive explosion reverberated throughout the surroundings. Glasses shattered and the whole building shook. This was the beginning of the Union's counterattack against the monolith. appearing before the dorm room and double-checking with the surveillance department that 876 had not left the room. Luther glanced at the 3 recruits that had followed him. "You guys stay out, I'll scout first," he warned. According to his predictions, the moment he would step into the room, the first he should see would be the corpses of the people that used to stay in that room. He had already asked the surveillance team beforehand, so he knew exactly how the people inside of the room looked like. Not that it mattered, since he was going to incapacitate anyone present in the room. The only reason he wanted to go first was that, aside from keeping the recruits safe, he wanted to keep the artifact that could change faces to himself. Having witnessed 876's journey all the way from the lab, Luther knew about the capabilities of the mask, and without a doubt, it wasn't a simple artifact. He knew it was a treasure, and he needed to get his hands on it at all costs. The closer he got to the mask, the greedier he became. This was one of the side effects of signing a contract with a demon. Their innermost desires overpowered everything else. This was the main reason why he didn't directly capture 876 back when he first saw him. The same could be said about the current situation. Had it been a more rational person, they would have been able to capture 876 by now, but Luther was not in a rational state. All he could think at the moment was the mask. Clink. Taking out a white card and scanning it, the door unlocked. Upon unlocking the door, without wasting time and opening the door to the room, the first thing Luther saw was an individual standing in the middle of the room holding onto a wooden mask that neared his face. With one guard beneath his feet and the others scattered around the room dead, the person standing in the middle of the room did not move. "I've got you now, 876. Staring at the mask, without wasting any time, Luther dashed towards 876. Bang! Tackling him with his shoulder, 876 crashed against the other side of the wall. The mask fell onto the floor and 876's back directly smashed against the wall as dust flew in the air. Briefly glancing in the direction of where 876 was and making sure he was knocked out, squinting, Luther lowered his head and stared at the mask that was by the side of his feet. Lowering his body, he grabbed the mask and checked its status. "So this is the artifact that allows you to change faces?" Checking the stats of the mask, a look of amazement appeared on his face. "Unranked artifact, no wonder you were able to make it this far." The more Luther looked at the mask, the more amazed he became. Despite being a commander, he was only in strength. He never actually owned any strong artifact, like the one that he was holding. Lifting his head and staring at 876, the undisguised greed in Luther's eyes became obvious as his face twisted savagely. "From this moment onwards, this mask is mine," Luther muttered inside of his mind. So predictable. A cold voice suddenly rang from behind, startling Luther out of his thoughts. Shortly after, a small crystalline object flew in Luther's direction. Turning around, Luther raised his hand to block the attack. Crack! However, the moment his forearm came into contact with the crystalline object, it broke apart into millions of pieces as a green gas diffused in the air, completely enveloping Luther's face. "What the?" Completely taken off guard, Luther inhaled the gas that spread in the air. Ha! Within a couple of seconds, Luther's eyes shot wide. Small red threads or blood appeared by the sides of his eyes as he knelt on the ground with both hands by the side of his neck. Opening his mouth like a goldfish, Luther struggled to find any words to say as his breathing started to become more laborious. "The human mind sure is strange." The cold voice once again rang inside of the room. Standing up, an all-knowing look appeared on Ren's face. All it takes is one artifact and they completely lose sight of what's around them. Well, in your case, it most likely has to do with the contract you've signed, but it really is easy to manipulate someone like you. Had Luther looked at the person he had knocked out, or just taken a better look at his surroundings, he would have easily found out that something was not quite right. But by directly exposing the mask in front of him, Ren had diverted his attention away from everything else, making Luther's next set of movements extremely predictable. Ren revealing the fact that he could change faces back in the forest was for the purpose of igniting Luther's greed. By following his primordial instincts that were enhanced due to the contract he signed, he became nothing more than just a puppet that Ren could easily control. Everything that Luther did after he found out about the mask was in accordance with what Ren willed. Kahua! Lifting his head, Luther watched Ren slowly walk up to him. Even though he wanted to fight back, he could barely lift his body as everything inside of him was melting at a rapid rate. If not for the intense amount of mana he was using, he would have long have died. Lifting the hat off of his face, and revealing his burned face, Ren tapped on the sword that was by the side of his waist. "Thank you for acting like I wanted you to." Click! Following this, a subtle clicking sound rang out, and silence descended in the room.